Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephania Cox. Here are today's top stories. President Trump says the U.S. is very close to a virus vaccine. He says it's happening in record time and adds that America will help other countries when it's done. The GOP has unveiled its stimulus package. As suggested by the White House, the HEALS Act brought over some features from the CARES Act passed in March and made adjustments to others. Unrest in Portland hits a 60-day mark. Protesters take pride, but locals tell us the message is lost amid violence and destruction. That's as rioters set in Seattle and Atlanta target federal buildings. Washington, D.C.'s mayor requires out-of-state travelers to quarantine when entering the district. It's a 14-day isolation for travelers from areas deemed high risk for contracting the virus. The Chinese Communist Party's propaganda department has issued an odd request after a U.S. consulate in China officially closed down. And China's flooding has sent the water level of a major river skyrocketing to a historic high. That's as several unapproved restaurants were found operating inside its embankment despite authorities' warnings. Trump says America will develop a vaccine very soon and in record time. It's happening under what's called Operation Warp Speed, a system created to streamline the FDA approval process and accelerate vaccine development.
Nothing's happened like this since the end of World War II.
Moderna's vaccine entered phase 3 today, and Trump says another vaccine is set to enter phase 3 in the days ahead. Trump says it's the fastest vaccine development in history. The administration made it possible by streamlining the FDA process for approval.
It'll be available to the American people immediately, and we'll probably have a lot for a lot of other people throughout the world. The world is suffering from this China virus.
Health and Human Services signed a $265 million contract with labs that are developing vaccines to help expand the vaccine research. Along with vaccine development, there are 140 ongoing clinical trials for therapies.
The mortality rate for patients over the age of 18 is 85% lower than it was in April. Think of that, 85%.
He added that months ago, 22% of people who got the virus died from it. Now, apparently, it's only 7% of people. President Trump also said America has conducted 52 million virus tests, which he says is more than double all of Europe's. And Trump says all the current hotspot states are showing good signs. He added that the stockpile of ventilators, masks, and PPE are there if governors need them. Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Trump says today's speech was optimistic because America is doing fairly well. He encouraged Americans to follow social distancing, avoid crowded spaces, and shield vulnerable people. And the GOP unveils its highly anticipated stimulus package, the HEALS Act. Senator Mitch McConnell introduced the bill, which stands for Health, Economic Assistance, Liability Protection, and Schools. The Kentucky senator says the act will include $1,200 direct payments, a sequel to the Payment Protection Program, school funding, and more. He said virus treatment, testing, and vaccine funding is also included. And as for one of the most controversial issues, a potential cut for enhanced unemployment benefits. Currently, the unemployed are getting $600 a week on top of their standard unemployment benefits, but McConnell suggests the bonus will be less than that under the HEALS Act. And police are now investigating after protests in both Seattle and Atlanta left federal buildings severely damaged. Nearly 60 Seattle officers were injured from rioters throwing explosives and other objects. 47 arrests were made in Seattle. It's unclear if any arrests were made in Atlanta. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has more details. And just a note, this video contains graphic images, so viewer discretion is advised.
Thousands of people marched through Seattle. Later, riots broke out, damaging buildings and causing injuries. This video from a police body cam shows rioters throwing explosives, bottles, rocks, and wood, injuring 59 officers. One was hospitalized. And the juvenile detention facility was damaged with broken windows and graffiti from all corners. Workers' cars were also damaged.
They slashed all four of my tires. They broke my back window out. They rolled on it. They busted windows out on the other side. They broke my rear view mirrors. You know, I just got off work. I want to go home.
And Seattle's East Precinct Police Department now has structural damage from the rioters throwing explosives at the building. Seattle police are still investigating who damaged the precinct. By the end of the riot, 47 were arrested for assaulting officers, failure to disperse, and obstruction. And on the same day in downtown Atlanta, rioters swept through, breaking windows and vandalizing this Immigration and Customs Enforcement building, which is also home to the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice. Authorities are still investigating who was involved in targeting the building. We reached out to the ICE office and Department of Homeland Security for more details, but did not immediately get a response. Local media reported that federal police have not arrested anyone, but it's not clear if other agencies made arrests. Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
In the wake of Portland's ongoing riots, there's growing concern about local businesses being damaged or even destroyed by the burning and looting. Certain protesters say they will try to prevent those acts from occurring, but don't outright condemn them.
Protesters in Portland pride themselves on demonstrating for over 60 nights under the name of Black Lives Matter, but riots emerged later in the night. Some who carry on with their lives in the day say the message has been completely lost. At night, rioters shoot fireworks and ignite fires at the federal courthouse. Graffiti is sprayed on dozens of walls throughout the city. Many businesses in the area remain at risk of substantial damage.
And that is definitely a huge concern. Like I said before, all these buildings are probably not too difficult for that many people to get into. So it is a concern. It's not as big of a concern as you would think it would be.
In a city less than 2 hours from Portland, hundreds of rioters took to the streets and attacked local businesses. One of those attending the protests and riots claimed that if a fire started, they would put it out.
We just want to talk, and I guess they don't want to do that. They don't want to reason. They don't understand. Yes, there's people out here. This is why I want to let everybody be known. Yes, there's people out here that want to throw fireworks and set flames, but me and my guys right here, we make sure to put the fires out.
But he did not say whether he was against the rioting. During a nightly protest, we saw no active effort to stop people from rioting. Most of the time, fireworks are followed by cheers and applause.
Right now, protesters are holding a rally along the Justice Center and the federal courthouse. Some of them said that the fence will come down this night, but it's very possible that federal officers will push them back with tear gas and pepper balls before that happens.
On Saturday afternoon, Portland police responded to a shooting near the federal courthouse. A person was found dead on the scene. Protesters are demanding that Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler resign and for federal law enforcement to leave Portland.
The late Representative John Lewis lies in his casket at the U.S. Capitol. Lewis was an important leader in the 1963 March on Washington and helped end segregation in the U.S. Politicians and members of the public have come to pay their respects to him. Lewis will be lying at the Capitol today and tomorrow.
Down Black Lives Matter Plaza, past the Washington Monument and the Lincoln Memorial, the casket of late Congressman John Lewis is on its way to the U.S. Capitol. At the age of 23, he was a keynote speaker and organizer of the historic March on Washington. And now at the age of 80, he lies in state where many come to pay respects to him.
John Lewis became a titan of the civil rights movement and then the conscience of the Congress. Here in Congress, John was revered and beloved on both sides of the aisle, on both sides of the Capitol.
In 1965, hundreds marched to the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, to demand blacks be allowed to vote. The fateful day is known as Bloody Sunday because police attacked the peaceful protesters with clubs, whips, and tear gas. Lewis was there that day.
I was just stunned, got chills when he told me that he was sitting comfortably on his couch, saw the march on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, was so shaken by it that he had to get up in a moral moment off of his couch, out of his comfort, and join the civil rights movement.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell pays respects to Lewis for his historic contributions to the country's march toward racial justice.
As far as I'm concerned, it is not really the rest of us in Congress who are conveying an honor upon John Lewis today. Not this time. Rather, it is John who is bringing greater honor to us, to this Capitol, with his presence one final time.
Lewis is receiving one of the highest honors as he is the first black lawmaker to lie in the Capitol's rotunda. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
And Washington, D.C. is imposing a mandatory quarantine for travelers arriving from most other U.S. states. A few exceptions apply, though. Washington, D.C.'s Mayor Muriel Bowser has ordered travelers from 27 states to self-quarantine for 14 days after arriving to the district. The states that fall into the regulation are high-risk areas. High risk means the 7-day moving average of daily new virus cases is 10 or more per 100,000 people. The rule comes after a spike in new infections across the country. The regulations only apply to people that were traveling for non-essential reasons. Exemptions apply to those who are traveling through a high-risk area or by vehicle or through an airport. And President Trump welcomed Terry Sharp, also known as the Walking Marine, at the White House. Terry walked 300 miles from North Carolina to Washington, D.C. to raise awareness about veteran suicides.
President Trump greeted a veteran known as the Walking Marine. Terry Sharp walked from Summerfield, North Carolina to Washington, D.C. to raise awareness of the current rate of veteran suicides, currently 22 per day. That's the equivalent of one veteran committing suicide every 65 minutes. He walks to bring attention to this terrible plight. 6,500 former military personnel died by suicide in 2012. More veterans succumbed to suicide than were killed in Iraq. In the same year, more soldiers committed suicide while in active duty than died in combat, marking highest numbers of suicides compared to any other service branch. A study shows almost 70% of all veterans who committed suicide were 50 and older. Mental health professionals say one reason could be these men gave up on life after their children are out of the house or a long-time marriage falls apart. This is Terry's 7th 300-mile walk.
The White House Rose Garden is to be renovated. The First Lady announced the planned changes.
First Lady Melania Trump announced a renewal of the White House Rose Garden this summer. The plan will provide a renewal of the design first implemented during the Kennedy administration. It has been the guiding blueprint for the Rose Garden since 1962. Decades of use and necessary changes made to support the modern presidency have taken a toll on the garden. The work on the Rose Garden will return it to its original 1962 footprint and upgrade its infrastructure. The plans include better accessibility for people with disabilities, support for audiovisual and broadcasting needs, a new walkway, and new flowers and shrubs. The First Lady says this renewal works to preserve the history and beauty of the White House. The project began in earnest last year and should take 3 weeks to complete.
2 Major League Baseball games are postponed after Miami Marlins players and staff test positive for the CCP virus. A Marlins home opener against the Baltimore Orioles was pushed back. ESPN reports at least 14 total virus cases on the Marlins, including 2 coaches and a number of players. A Yankees game was postponed in Philadelphia because they would have used the same visitors' clubhouse that the Marlins used last weekend. Marlins CEO Derek Jeter said in a statement that the team has been tested again and that they will stay in Philadelphia until they get those results. And coming up, a new study shows more Americans are hesitant to share their political views in today's social climate. And baseball fans in Chicago are watching games from the rooftops. Major League Baseball has resumed play without spectators in the stadium. That story and more after the break.
The coronavirus outbreak is the latest wake-up call.
U.S. Senator Ben Sasse put it plainly. The Chinese Communist Party has lied, is lying, and will continue to lie about coronavirus to protect the regime.
In 5 to 10 years, we'll have virtually no manufacturing capacity left for generic drugs. And again, this is 90% of our medicines.
And the world should know, if Hong Kong falls, the whole world falls, okay? Because the Chinese Communist Party is the existential risk of humanity, period.
Since the CCP took power, 80 million people have died from its policies and political campaigns.
They're using our institutions and our norms and our values against us in ways that we hadn't necessarily envisioned towards their own authoritarian agenda.
From the party's great firewall in cyberspace, or to that great wall of sand in the South China Sea.
More repression, more unfair competition, more predatory economic practices, indeed a more aggressive military posture as well.
If we do not meet this threat now, it's going to define our century.
A new poll shows over 60% of Americans say the current political climate prevents them from sharing their views. The study shows conservatives are less comfortable sharing their political opinions than liberals, but more people of all political groups feel as though they're walking on eggshells.
Whether you're a diehard MAGA Trump supporter,
this is about easing the squeeze,
or you're riding with Biden, or neither, you may be less likely to share your political views nowadays. A new study shows 62% of Americans are reluctant to share their political opinions out of fear of offending someone. That number has increased 4 points since 2017. The results come from a recent survey by the Cato Institute, a think tank based on the principles of individual liberty, limited government, free markets, and peace. Cato polled 2,000 Americans in this survey. They found that the only group that feels they can speak up about what they believe is strong liberals, while conservatives are more likely to keep it to themselves. But everyone across the political spectrum is hiding their views more and more since 2017. The study also shows nearly a third of employed Americans are worried about losing their jobs if their employers find out about their political stance. A phenomenon that has emerged in recent decades is called cancel culture, which refers to withdrawing support of people or companies that have said or done something considered offensive. The study shows the cancel culture appeared more often among strong liberals, as half of them said they support firing someone who donated to the Trump campaign. This is compared to about a third of staunch conservatives who said they'd support firing Biden donors.
While professional sports resume without spectators, baseball fans in Chicago are getting a top row seat.
Rooftops neighboring Chicago's Wrigley Field are allowing fans a rare opportunity to see Major League Baseball games in person.
It's the game as usual. I mean, they're going out and competing. They're shifting for every batter. They're still studying the tape before the games. You can tell by the way they set up. And it's baseball as usual on the field.
The new venue has taken some getting used to for fans, and the rooftops don't provide the same experience as being in the stadium, but fans are adjusting to the new view.
It's a lot less energy. For the players, I'm sure they're competitive, they'll keep playing, but for the fans, we were talking up here, there's no energy, but it's a different experience. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience, so to be a part of it is pretty cool.
And after being stuck at home for 5 months, they're enjoying the opportunity to see a game live, even if they aren't in the ballpark.
Definitely feel sad that the stands are empty, but I still really enjoy the fact that I can go to the game, that I get to see the environment, that I get to be outside, hear the music, and see the players, the people who we love to watch.
Safety protocols were still in effect at the rooftop venues. There were temperature checks at the entrance and reminders about social distancing, with some seats blocked off.
Still to come, one of the U.S. consulates in China officially closed, and now China's propaganda department is issuing an odd request. And a major Chinese river's water level is hitting a historic high, but several unapproved restaurants were found still operating inside the river's embankment. Find out more when we return.
Hello there.
Doesn't it feel like we're moving further away from the very values that our republic was built upon? And the media in our country have just been adding fuel to the flame, which is why you need to try The Epoch Times. It's pure, honest journalism that's restoring traditional values and reports the news with no spin, no hidden agendas, and no false narratives. So if you want to know the truth about the FISA abuse that took place during the 2016 election, or how socialist and communist ideologies have been infiltrating our society, or how the Chinese Communist Party's cover-up led to this global pandemic, and so much more, then you need to try The Epoch Times. And for a limited time, you can try the paper yourself for a full month for just a single $1, and we'll send you a very special gift. A 58-page magazine that investigates the truth behind the Chinese Communist Party's cover-up of the virus. So go to readepoch.com, try The Epoch Times, get your free gift, and stay truly informed.
This week on China Uncensored, the U.S. orders a Chinese consulate to close. The Chinese ambassador is at a loss for words when asked about Uyghur concentration camps. And the U.S. could put a ban on Chinese Communist Party members. Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on NTD America.
The U.S. consulate in Chengdu, China officially closed today. Beijing ordered it to shut down in retaliation for Washington's closure of the Chinese consulate in Houston, Texas. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has more on the story.
The American flag in front of the U.S. consulate in Chengdu was taken down Monday morning local time. This put an end to a 35-year official presence of the United States in the city. The U.S. mission and China's Twitter account stated, "Today we embark on a new job with pride in the work we have done and the friendship left in our memory by the people of Southwest China." Despite the closure, Chinese police still restricted access to the area around the consulate. Some locals snapped photos of the scene. Local resident Mr. Lee said the severing of relations between China and the U.S. makes him feel sad. That's because far below the national level, relations between the countries also impact ordinary Chinese citizens.
Because we need to go and travel in the U.S., and some of our relatives need to go and study in the U.S., these things will all be greatly affected. That includes the economy between the two countries, which will gradually deteriorate and even break apart. That's why we are paying a lot of attention to it. This sort of relations severing between China and the U.S. actually makes us feel really sad.
Elsewhere, a person held up a pro-CCP banner reading, "Long live the People's Republic of China, long live the Chinese people, and long live Xi Jinping." He was taken away by police soon after. Now to the Chinese consulate in the U.S. U.S. Senator Ted Cruz said Sunday that more Chinese diplomatic missions could be closed in the U.S. Last week, the Chinese consulate in Houston, Texas was closed. U.S. authorities accused it of engaging in espionage and intellectual property theft. Now to China's reaction to the U.S. decisions. Posters have been put up in Beijing teaching people how to get into underground air defense facilities after alarms go off. In the 1960s, lots of civil air defense networks were built in large cities. It was done at a time when the CCP was preparing for war with the Soviet Union and the U.S. Now we look at an odd request made by China's propaganda department. China's State Administration for Radio, Film and Television, a branch of the Communist Party's propaganda department, issued an order earlier this month. It requested that television stations across the country broadcast dramas about Chinese-Japanese war in the 1940s and the Korean War in the 1950s. It's an effort to praise the so-called greatness of the regime's army. The Korean conflict was a war between North and South Korea, which was prompted by a North Korean invasion of South Korea. China and the Soviet Union supported North Korea, while the United Nations, especially the United States, backed South Korea. In the end, North Korea proved unable to conquer South Korea, and the war ended with armistice. But in China, another version of that history is publicized. For decades, the Chinese Communist Party has been spreading the narrative that South Korea invaded North Korea instead. It also says that in order to protect China, the party fought together with North Korea and defeated the U.S. And in another unusual move, a notice was issued last week by a neighborhood management organization in the northwestern city of Chongqing. That notice, that's now circulating online, says that family members of active border and coastal defense troops are invited to register with the neighborhood management. It extends the offer in particular to the family members of soldiers and officers in Xinjiang, Tibet, Yunnan, Guangxi, and Hainan. Xinjiang and Tibet are home to the Uyghurs and Tibetans respectively. There, more protests against the CCP have occurred than in other regions. Yunnan, Guangxi, and Hainan share borders with countries that are pushing back against China's aggression in the South China Sea. Chinese political commentator Sun Bing told Radio Free Asia that there have also been similar notices in other cities. Retired soldiers and officers have also been reportedly told to register with the authorities. Bing said that means these people could be made to join the army at any time. He added that the CCP is working to create a tense atmosphere in order to control people. If someone protests, authorities can then accuse him of supporting the U.S.
While flooding is still plaguing China's longest river, a new round of flooding is emerging upstream, the biggest yet this year. Downstream, a major river's water levee has climbed above its warning lines, but several restaurants are found inside its embankment, and they're still open. NTD's Juliet Song has more.
In southern China, a major river's water level has hit a historic high, but several luxury restaurants were found inside the river embankment, even though they weren't supposed to be there. On top of that, they were still open while authorities raised the flood alert to its highest level. The restaurants have been there for 6 years. Even though it's not legally approved, the company that built the embankment opened up space inside and rented units out to business owners. As a result, authorities tore down the restaurants overnight. While massive flooding is still plaguing regions surrounding the Yangtze River, the country's longest river, a new wave of floodwater has emerged upstream, and it's the biggest yet this year. Regions upstream are already suffering. In parts of Sichuan province, torrential rain is triggering landslides. Roads have been damaged, signals are cut off, and the power went out for some areas. A video circulating online shows a man braving the flood while trying to save his cattle. Moments later, the strong current washed away a young calf as an older animal appeared to chase after it. In the end, all of them were washed away and the man came back empty-handed. Moving further downstream to a city hit particularly hard by the flooding. Videos posted online showed massive floodwater as it washed away multiple cars. And a narrow escape. A person trapped inside a flooded building was seen reaching out his hands for help. That's as the water had nearly filled the first floor. Before long, the entire first floor was submerged, but the voice in the video said the person managed to escape. A large part of the city's downtown area is already underwater. Further downstream, floodwaters are almost as high as the tops of school buildings. Besides the waves of flooding, other natural disasters are also striking the country. Areas upstream from the Three Gorges Dam recently reported a magnitude 3.4 earthquake. The destruction has sparked concerns about the safety of the famous dam. One expert, well known for his research on the dam, said previously that it can only withstand earthquakes below magnitude 6. The upstream region has already seen several earthquakes this month, the biggest of which was magnitude 4. Juliet Song, NTD News.
Coming up, New Yorkers are leaving the Big Apple and rent prices are dropping to record lows. An economist says working from home and tastes among renters are driving the decline. And the Trump administration has relaxed export restrictions for some military drones. The move could help the security interests of both the United States and its allies. Find out more after the break.
大提琴不仅仅是一件乐器，它是有生命、有感情的，需要我们精心的照顾。往往我们一个小小的动作，可能都会对人情绪产生微妙的影响。天音的品牌是福星，我们对于传统的理念很荣幸被神韵艺术团选为指定供应商。时间是酿造音色的不可替代的陪伴。我跟大提琴已经有60多年的友情了，每一把琴都有它自己的个性，熟悉它，才能真正发挥它的潜力。所以，我希望给你的每一把琴，都是首先我所信任的。
New Yorkers are moving out of the city and into less populated areas. Since people are working from home for the foreseeable future, their rental priorities have changed. And now rent prices in New York City are at record lows.
New York City's rent prices are at record lows because of the virus. Nancy Wu, an economist with Street Easy, says New Yorkers are staying and working from home longer than they have ever in the past.
A lot of renters have been moving out of the city temporarily or permanently. New hires are not moving into the city because they're working from home, and more apartments are coming onto the market as leases expire.
That means increased supply and weaker demand and record price cuts. Plus, renters' tastes have changed. Pet-friendly apartment buildings used to be high on the popularity list. Now, backyards and washers and dryers in the apartment are in high demand.
So now a lot of renters are prioritizing more space, greater affordability over a shorter commute time to their offices because they're working from home. So we're seeing less preferences for Manhattan apartments, more for outer borough apartments.
A government report shows that U.S. home sales increased by the most on record in June, boosted by historically low mortgage rates. Another report said that sales of new single-family homes rose to a near 13-year high in June. The housing market is outperforming the broader economy because of record low interest rates and the migration from cities to less populated areas. But Wu says sellers are taking houses off the market to wait out the pandemic. She says that will lead to price drops in the future.
2 months after filing for bankruptcy, Hertz has struck a deal with lenders. It has to sell 182,000 cars by the end of the year. By getting rid of almost half of its vehicles, the deal will help pay off $650 million in lease-related debts and still leave Hertz with enough cars to keep the business running post-pandemic. And there was a bit of luck involved. The used car market saw a boost in recent months, allowing the agreement to be made. The sell-off will cut Hertz's debt from $11 billion to $5 billion. And the Trump administration has relaxed controls on exports of military drones. It's a move that could help U.S. national security and boost the U.S. economy.
U.S. defense contractors can now sell more drones to more countries after President Trump signed a new policy. According to the State Department, this will boost the American industry and help U.S. partners and allies meet urgent security and commercial needs. The action bypasses the Missile Technology Control Regime, or MTCR, which is an informal agreement between 35 countries to prevent the spreading of nuclear arms. Trump's plan reclassifies drones that fly below a certain speed, allowing them to be sold to allied nations while avoiding the MTCR's harsh regulations. The White House says the MCTR handicaps U.S. partners and allies while giving an unfair advantage to countries outside of the agreement. Assistant Secretary Clark Cooper of the State Department's Bureau of Political Military Affairs says stopping the spread of weapons technology to nations like North Korea and Iran remains a top priority for the administration. Foreign countries and allies want to buy U.S. drones for counterterrorism and security missions. A Republican senator says the international limits on drone exports have allowed the Chinese military to advance its defense technology. He says it's also led China to build relationships with traditional U.S. partners. Under Trump's presidency, the U.S. has withdrawn from other international treaties, including the Iran nuclear deal and the Paris Climate Accord.
Coming up, a man who almost died in a stabbing in London turned his life around to become a champion boxer. He now speaks to young people about knife crime. And after Huawei, senior lawmakers are questioning the involvement of a Chinese state firm in the UK's nuclear plants. More on these after the break.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and bite-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format, where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled, and political agendas have subverted media. The Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
A Londoner who was stabbed and nearly died as a teenager is now a British boxing champion. He's telling his story to help others. He spoke with NTD's UK correspondent Jane Werrell in London.
I had the most severe stabbing, nearly died.
At 15 years old, Richard Riakpur was caught up in a stabbing outside a nightclub. A man approached him and his friends.
He started asking everybody to give their phones over, and he asked a guy. He hesitated. He stabbed him. Proceeded to stab him. He proceeded to stab a few other individuals, and I ended up getting stabbed as well when he asked me for my phone. I'm very lucky to be having this interview with you because it could have gone either way. There's a lot of people that had that same type of injury and didn't make it. They're 6 feet deep today.
He was drawn into street life from a young age, but that experience changed everything.
I decided I wanted to, pursue success, change my environment, change my life, and that's when I started off by walking into a boxing gym. I then went on to study, graduated, and then I turned professional.
Just 2 years later, in 2019, he won the British Cruiserweight Championship. To this day, he's undefeated in professional boxing. He talks to young people about his experiences.
With me, I like to tell my story a lot because when I was in that situation, I never had people to give me advice.
And tries to motivate and inspire them.
Do what we can to make this world a better place and help individuals all across the world, because that's what life is all about. In my opinion, helping others and lifting others up and just trying to make a better world. Time is priceless; you don't get back.
Jane Rubble, NTD News, London.
Senior lawmakers are questioning a Chinese state firm's involvement in the construction of a UK nuclear plant after it was revealed that more than 100 Chinese engineers and experts are working on site. NTD UK's Neil Woodrow will bring us more news from Europe.
Thanks. Welcome to the NTD UK newsroom, bringing you UK and European news. Senior lawmakers are questioning a Chinese state firm's involvement in the construction of a UK nuclear plant. A deal was signed off in 2016 between the UK government and a French developer, EDF, to build a plant in southwest England. China General Nuclear, or CGN, took a nearly 40% stake, vowing to be a financial backer only. CGN is a state-owned company. However, the Sunday Telegraph reports CGN has more than 100 engineers and technical experts working on Hinkley. A former Conservative leader said it was obviously never just going to be a financial partnership. Nick Timothy, who tried unsuccessfully as Mrs. May's top advisor to block the Chinese deal, said, "If it is true that China has a significant operational role at Hinkley, then there are many questions that need to be answered." Last week, CGN applied for a license to generate electricity at another proposed UK nuclear reactor. And the British government announced that travellers returning from Spain need to self-isolate for 14 days, making thousands of British tourists there panic.
Last Friday, Spain reported more than 900 new cases of the CCP virus and warned of a second wave. The next day, British government brought back the quarantine rules, which was bad news for British tourists in Spain. Some of them rushed to the airport.
It's really bad because it's just come all of a sudden. It's not given people much time to prepare, so everyone's now panicking.
The UK government said they had to make a swift decision, so they couldn't make apologies. Its medical officer had to remind people that
we're in the middle of a global pandemic. It's always been clear that at this time, no travel internationally is risk-free, and there has always been the possibility of disruption.
The Spanish government is trying to save its tourism sector. After discussions with the British government, the quarantine rules exclude two popular destination islands, the Canary Island and the Balearic Island.
Spain is a safe country for tourists and for Spaniards. Like in any other European country, we are seeing outbreaks. The outbreaks in Spain are perfectly controlled.
Catalonia is the hotspot of Spain's uptick in new cases. The wealthy northeast region, which is home to Barcelona, has ordered all nightclubs to close for 2 weeks and recommended that some 4 million people stay home and avoid all but necessary trips. Norway has also slapped a 14-day quarantine on travellers from Spain. France has warned its citizens not to travel to Catalonia. A junior British health minister revealed France and Germany were also on the UK's watch list.
To the EU, the German central bank Bundesbank says the EU's $1 trillion coronavirus aid package for weaker member states should be a one-off. Bundesbank warns the borrowing can't serve as a blueprint for future budget challenges. EU leaders managed to finally clinch a deal on July 21st to raise up to $880 billion from capital markets. The sum mirrors the expected $1 trillion aid package being put forward by US Senate Republicans and the White House to support the US economy. And France plans to ban outdoor heaters used by restaurants and cafes starting early next year. It's accelerating a move toward a low-carbon economy.
France's ecology minister says it's not right to fully heat terraces in the middle of chilly winter only for the pleasure of drinking a coffee outdoors.
This is about ending practices that constitute ecological aberrations that lead to completely unjustified overconsumption of energy.
Pompili says the government will give restaurant owners time to adapt since they're still suffering from the pandemic.
We will make this measure mandatory at the end of next winter to prevent this from burdening them too heavily as of now.
The outdoor heater ban is one of several changes announced by France's Ecological Defence Council on Monday.
The decision comes as France readies an environmentally friendly bill to tackle climate change. Last month, President Macron promised over $19 billion of new funding for a greener economy. Moving on, the CCP virus pandemic has left many artists with little or no livelihood. But one French troupe had a two-night run in a picturesque countryside. The result, a success.
Against a backdrop of an 18th century castle and grazing cows, singer Eveline Zhu rode through water lilies. Pianist Cécile Velters played classics by Chopin, Ravel and Debussy on her floating piano. They are from the performance troupe Le Piano du Lac, or the Lake Piano. Velters aims to bring classical music to the countryside, where concert halls are not common. She said rapport with the audience was especially strong this time.
I am so moved this year, much more than the other years, to see an audience in front of me who came despite this situation.
Due to the pandemic, Le Piano du Lac had to cancel 2 tours. They are now more confident of tours in the future.
And a Belarusian ornithologist has come up with an unusual way of supporting birds of prey. That is, to build artificial nests for them.
73-year-old Volodymyr Ivanovsky has dedicated his whole life to the study and preservation of birds of prey. He discovered that intensive forestry is putting them at risk.
Our forests are becoming younger very quickly, and it's becoming harder and harder to find predatory birds that make their nests in the trees.
He has built nearly 700 artificial nests where birds of all shapes and sizes can make their homes. He tags birds so they can be monitored. But feathered friends haven't moved into all of the nests he's built.
On average, if we talk about all birds of prey, then 35% have been inhabited.
The figure is high, and Ivanovsky is very proud of what he has done for birds of prey.
That's all from the UK newsroom. Back over to New York.
Thanks, Neil. And coming up, in Paris, hundreds of beehives dot the city. Beekeeping on urban rooftops has its challenges and rewards in the urban environment. That and more when we return.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and bite-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled and political agendas have subverted media. the Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
Bees sometimes opt for a life in the city. Take Paris, which has hundreds of hives. Bees and humans face some challenges living side by side, but it turns out for the best. Our France correspondent David Vives has the story.
Few residents have the chance to live a life on the rooftops of Paris with the view to themselves. Among them are the bees. Every day, beekeeper Gaël Colton climbs stairs of buildings and pays them a visit. Today, he's at the five-star hotel Mandarin Oriental. Just a few meters from the luxury site are its two hives.
I think we have 55 pounds of honey here.
Urban hives present some challenges.
As urban beekeepers, we have to adapt to our environment, so we work and breed our own queen. So we look for bees who have a good temperament and don't sting people.
These are kind bees indeed. They didn't sting the reporter who forgot his protection equipment.
Here is the queen. Can you see it?
Having a hive on the rooftop made sense for the director of the hotel, who wanted to contribute more to the environment.
First, we had one hive. The bees were doing fine, so we chose to get a second.
A bee colony swarms as a natural way of reproduction when the old queen leaves with some of the bees. Up to 50,000 bees can move from the hive to find another place to set up a new hive. Colton specifically chose bees that don't swarm, but nature has its own rules. According to Emily, one day several thousand bees swarmed into the hotel court, scaring clients and staff. Luckily, no one was stung. Except for this event, the cohabitation is harmonious and profitable for both bees and humans.
We are using this honey for our signature cocktails at the bar. Sometimes our chef Thierry Marx uses it for his recipes, and sometimes we give honey pots to our customers.
And here's the result. An ambered color honey, all from flowers that bees got from trees in Paris. Colton worked to make his honey a high-end product sold in small pots. It met with success in Paris with luxury retailers. Some of this honey will end in honey pots. Some of it will be baked in pastries.
We are cooking gingerbread, nuggets, and candies using the best qualities for our products. We have all aromas of roasted hazelnuts, almonds, and pistachios, balanced with the honey. Pure happiness.
It's a taste of the flowers and trees from the parks and gardens of Paris. Reporting by David Vives, NTD News.
Some restaurant and business owners are using safety measures to give their patrons a daily dose of cuteness. One cafe in Mexico City is using giant teddy bears to encourage customers to maintain social distancing.
Located in the capital's fashionable Polanco district, Jeso Bakery is placing the bears on seats at its outdoor tables to keep its diners at a safe distance from each other.
This idea with these great teddy bears, I think everyone likes it. As a kid having a bear, I still have my teddy bear to this day. From when I was born to now more than 70 years of age. That is why I came to this place, to have a drink and to help out the business, and for us to be aware of social distancing.
Patrons and cafe staff say the giant toys are an effective and fun way of promoting social distancing.
To invite you all to restaurants and also to make distancing a little friendlier. With the teddy bears, one is motivated to come with their kids, their partner.
Virus infections in Mexico's capital are still running high. As of Sunday, Mexico was approaching 400,000 cases and more than 40,000 deaths.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.
A major Chinese river's water level is hitting a historic high, but several restaurants were located inside its embankment and they were still open. The U.S. Consulate in Chengdu was closed, putting an end to its 35-year presence in the city. It received a mixed response from Chinese people. In Hong Kong, Xinjiang, and northeastern provinces, CCP virus cases are surging. The head of China's CDC went to a northeastern city. He made a similar trip months ago, but to Wuhan, the epicenter of the pandemic. India has banned nearly 50 more Chinese-made smartphone apps, while an Indian court has summoned Alibaba's founder Jack Ma. The case relates to censorship and a former employee. And the European Union is set to limit tech exports to Hong Kong. It covers equipment that could be used for repression or surveillance under the new law. And an Eastern European country joins other countries in Europe in speaking out against the Chinese Communist Party. Tune in at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time and tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time to watch the full China in Focus.